Hello, everybody, and I hope everybody had a great weekend. This is Sunday evening, and I'm putting out a new oil painting. This one's a little different size-wise. The last few I've been doing a little smaller. This one's a 14 by 18, and it's a stretched cotton canvas. It's Blick Premier brand. It's a really good brand of canvas. I've got a couple of different types of oil paint I'm using today. I've got a little bit of Rembrandt, and I've got a couple tubes of the Lukas 1862. Both are artist grade, and both are really good paints, actually. So here I am. I got a little bit of a sketch out there, you can see. I got a little bit of waterfall on the left, some big trees on the right. That's going to be a distant hill that's on the left that I'm kind of cutting around the sky with right now at the moment. And then the river is going to come from left to right where the waterfall is. One of the things that I'm looking forward to a lot now is the spring. It's already into March, and I'm in the Midwest, and yesterday was 68 degrees. Today, I don't think it got to 40, and it was windy and cold and everything else. And then it's supposed to snow tonight, and the next Saturday is supposed to be a high at 29, so I'm painting spring stuff just to try to get my head wrapped around. Long about March, and I'm pretty much done with the winter time. I don't care if I don't see it again until Christmas time. Okay, so right now what I'm going to be doing next is, what I'm going to be doing next is putting in some clouds. Now, one of the things you're going to see here is I got the paint a little too thick, okay? And then it also had a little bit too much medium in it, and once I start to blend it out a little bit, it's not going to look right. It's going to be a little shiny. And then that's where I'm going to do the paper towel thing. And actually not a paper towel, shop towel. I'm sorry. Kevin Hill, please forgive me. He's the one that actually I saw this with, so he taught everybody, but I learned it from him about using a shop towel to get the excess paint and oil off of an area that you can't work with. So that area you see right there is just a little too uck. And basically it's just too much oil and too much paint on it. So what I'm doing is I'm not wiping it off, okay? You can see I'm putting it on and I'm letting it stay there, and then I'm just rubbing it. And that takes away all the excess. So now with the dry brush, I can blend it out real nice, and you see how the nice shape that the different clouds is? Now I'm going to put in a little bit more. And then, like you can tell already, the blending of it is going to be a lot easier. And just so you know, when I'm blending it here, I'm barely touching the canvas. As the late, great Bob Ross would say, 3 hairs and some air, very lightly. Just enough to kind of spread the paint and kind of soften the edges a bit. And that's all you really need to do with clouds. There are some people that do some really incredible skyscapes. I really never got into skyscapes. I wanted to always have that as, the landscape is the main thing. I might get into skyscapes because some of them, like I said, are incredible. But as of right now, I just like adding a basic sky, sometimes different colors, and just putting it into whatever scene that I'm going to have going. Now, this hill is a little darker than I wanted initially, and I'm going to lighten it up a little bit as we go. And then I'm going to have some trees in front of it and some darker trees to the side to push it back a little bit. This is Payne's gray and white, and I didn't really put enough white in it, as you can see. And now I'm going to start to do some of the highlights, and if you've seen a lot of my videos, I do a lot of my highlights of mountains and rocks and stuff like that with a palette knife to make it, really pronounced and stand out. But what I don't want to do with this is have that kind of harsh detail because I don't want these to be like foreground mountains. So that way, if I have them a little more subtle, then they're not going to be as forward. Here I'm just putting in the shadow, and this is just a little bit of cerulean blue and white, and I'm mixing it in with the Payne's gray that's on the base. That's why you can see me stroking it so many times. I'm blending it as I go, just to give it a little hint of the blue, but also blend with the Payne's gray. And now I'm going to go over the highlight part again, just to make sure everything looks good. And I'm not, like I said, going real thick with this. I just wanted enough to you see the highlights, and you see the shape, the three-dimensional shape of the mountain. But I don't want it to be, like I said, really pronounced and upfront and stuff. Now I'm going to have one more time of sculpting it. I'm not going to be adding paint. It's going to be basically a dry brush. And I'm just going to be the last part of forming actually I should say sculpting the part of the mountain. And we're pretty much done. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's a mountain. It's going to have its little crevices, creeks, and everything else in it. And then the next thing I'm going to do, if I'm not mistaken, are the trees on the right. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm also going to have a thick amount of paint on there, especially dark paint. And then I'm going to use the shop towel deal to take care of that. Now, I started with this brush here, and it gave me a real nice look, but I wanted to go, and I'm using it still, but I'm going, I don't know if you can tell, it's hard to. I'm pushing harder to make the bristles spread out more. The other ones were like too thin, and I wanted this to be more like a forest look to it. And basically, when you want it to do that, you just need to press harder and let the bristles kind of flay out a little bit, and then you get that look you're, wanting to do. Okay, right now I've got a real nice basic setup here for the top third of my canvas. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting a shop towel over the trees that I just put in. Those are going to be the background part of the trees, the base, I guess. And I'm going to leave that there while I do other parts of the painting. I'm going to kind of mush it in a little bit and not knock the canvas over. And then once I get it all mushed in a little bit like that, I'm just going to let it sit, and that's going to draw a lot of the oil out. Kevin Hill is an oil painter. He does acrylics as well, but mainly oil. He does some acrylics. He's on YouTube. He's a great teacher. His paintings are absolutely beautiful. And like I said, he's the one that I learned the shop towel, I don't want to say trick, but I guess it is, a trick to really help with not creating mud and to really get to make the details and the highlights stick a lot better. So I've mentioned him several times, and if you ever get a chance and you want to see some really, really incredible oil paintings, mine are nice, his are wow. Go check out Kevin Hill Oil Painting on YouTube. And I think he's got a Patreon page, and he has DVDs on his website. He's pretty much a one-stop shop to learn how to oil paint, and like I said, acrylic as well. Okay, now I'm doing the waterfall part of it, as well as the river. Now, if you noticed, if you can see right below the shop towel, I got that real thin line of blue going from right to left. That's going to be the feeder river, let's say, to where the waterfall is. That's going to feed the waterfall. And then we're going to basically hide a lot of that with foliage and things. But at the moment, you need the waterfall to get its water from somewhere, and that's where it's coming from. I mean, there are paintings that I've done, and a lot of people have done, where you don't see what feeds the waterfall. For some reason, I just wanted to put that in there, kind of like a meandering stream in the back that's kind of subtle and out of the way. It feeds the waterfall and then comes into this rather large river, that's in the foreground. It was kind of what I was going through my mind. I was listening to Jimmy Buffett music, and I was just kind of going with it, I guess. Now I'm trying to smooth this out a little bit. I'm not going to use a shop towel on this because I didn't go crazy with the thickness of the paint. And as you can see, I'm spreading it out real nice, so when I put the water in with the white, and then, the current and the waves and stuff like that, it'll show up really nice. Now, one of the things that I'm doing here is I'm putting in the foreground in this part, and I didn't wash the brush, rinse it off, or anything else. I just went right into some sap green and a little bit more of our ultramarine blue, and I'm doing both of the grass parts with it. One of the things you're going to learn as you begin your oil painting adventures is you don't have to wash your brush every time you paint. The only time you wash your brush is when you're going to use the same brush for a different element that has to have a different color. So you don't want anything kind of muddying up the color that you have. Now I went from the river to grassy areas. So what makes green? Blue. It's part of it. So you can't make green without blue, pretty much. Or blue-ish. Payne's gray, and some others can if you want to get technical. But basically, green and yellow make blue. So when I'm putting blue into my green, because it's still left on my brush from when doing the river, it just enhances the green. It doesn't, hurt it or anything like that. Okay, now I'm putting in a little bit of burnt umber and green as well. A little bit more umber than green. So it's like a brownish green. and that's finishing off the last of the white of the canvas. So now our canvas is completely covered with our underpainting. The only part of our scene that's finished are the little distant mountains that you see there on the left-hand side and our sky. Everything else is just an underpainting, and then we'll be taking care of it. This is a little bit longer video than what I've been doing. Normally it's a 26-minute video that is real time, and then I speed it up to like 12 to 14 minutes to make it easier on YouTube and to watch and stuff. This one, real time, was 46 minutes, and the main reason why was, one, the size. See, look at that. And basically that's just the excess, you know. As you can see, it still has the shapes and the colors and everything you want. Just the excess oil and paint are what it took up. And now it's going to be easier to put in our tree trunks and our highlights. But as I was saying, the reason why this one's a lot longer is because the size. You know, instead of an 8x10 or 11x14, it's a 14x18. So it's a much bigger painting than we've been doing lately. And the other thing is, too, I had to do the shop towel trick to get some thick paint, so it'll work a lot easier for everybody when you're doing it. And then this one's a little bit more intricate for a composition. There's a little bit more to it than some of the other ones I'm doing, but it's still a basic painting. It's just a little bit more involved. There's not any weird elements that, you know, really complicated. It's just elements that just more of them, I should say. Okay, now what I did is those trunks are brown, and they were mixing a little bit with the green paint as I was coming down. And to make them stand out, what I'm doing is I'm putting in just straight titanium white, and then I'm doing extra taps to mix it with the brown and the green to get a trunk shape and feel to it. I want them to be visible, but I don't want them to be standing out because these trees are not foreground trees. So once I have the foliage on, you'll be able to see the trunks better, but they're still not going to be a dominant part of the composition. Again, because of where they're at, I don't want the detail to be, you know, crazy detail and see every little crack in the bark. If that tree was where, let's say, my arm and the sleeve of my sweatshirt is, you know, that part of the foreground, that's different. Then you'd want to see every little part of that tree trunk and every little part of the bark. But where it's at now, you just need the indication of it. Okay, so this painting is coming along nice. I really wasn't sure what I was going to paint, and you saw the sketch beforehand. I came up with that sketch about 10 minutes before I started the video, actually. I was trying to come up with what I wanted. I was getting tired of looking outside and seeing how cold it was, and then I decided, you know something? I'm going to do a nice little waterfall and kind of springish scene. Okay, what I'm doing now is the highlights, and I'm doing a couple of different colors here. I didn't want everything the same color. So the first one is yellow ochre with lemon yellow, and then the other one is lemon yellow with just a hair of alizarin crimson, and I think I'm going to put some sap green and yellow and sap green and ochre in it as well for some of the others. And the reason I do that is if you look in nature, you rarely see trees, even if they're a cluster right next to each other, that are identical in color. There's always a variation somewhere, okay? And the variation is what you want to get in your paintings. Now, one of the other things, too, is if you notice how bright those yellows and everything are, and the oranges and the yellow ochre, that's not realistic. And that was obvious the way I'm doing it. So now I'm taking straight sap green, which I rarely do take in straight tube color, but now I'm kind of dulling it down, getting the little darker in there. So now we just see the patches of highlight, which is realistic. You know, you're going to see parts of the trees that are really shiny, but just a few parts, not everything. So that's why I put in a lot more of the dark green afterwards. So there's like 3 different values in there for the trees. Now I'm putting in just a little bit of foothills in front of those mountains, just a way to push them back. Normally, when you have when you're doing an oil painting, you start with the darks, and then you add the highlights. Every once in a while, I'll do it the opposite, like I'm doing on these. See, I wasn't satisfied. There's a little too much light there for me, so I went in and put in a little bit more dark. One of the things that you can't see, but I do on a regular basis, is I step back about 6 feet sometimes a little bit more for my painting as I'm doing it, just to get a little better perspective. The rule of thumb is paintings are to be viewed from 6 to 8 feet away, not right on top of them. And when you're painting them, you pretty much are right on top of them. So you need to get in the habit of going back and just checking it out and seeing what the perspective is, and then making your adjustments as you go. And like I said, in a painting like this that took 46 minutes, I probably step back at least a dozen times to check it out. Okay, right now I put in the midground here, which I don't like at all. And this is going to be a nice little lesson in changing. Oil paintings are awesome for being able to change mistakes or just change what you want to do as you're going on the fly, because they don't dry so quickly. And even with acrylics, it's still not bad because acrylic is an opaque medium, so it's easy to change them once they dry. You're not going to, reblend something with acrylics, but you are going to be able to go over it if it's not, too much texture on it. Okay, now I'm putting in my river water, and basically what I want to do is try to make it, a little bit realistic. So right by the waterfall is going to be, all the big splashy things and the harshest current. And then as it goes, the current's going to be moving, but it's not going to be as violent. So I'm going to basically have the white to indicate the water's movement. And now, if you notice, the little wave parts are just little white caps, much, much smaller than the ones that are by the waterfall itself. So I wanted to just make sure I had that a little bit more realistic. Now this, I'm kind of fiddling with, and I'm not sure why. As I'm doing it, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know why, because a lot of it's going to be covered. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Every once in a while, you just get something in your head and you really can't understand why. You just kind of go with it. So that's what I did. I went with it. Okay, now the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the 1-inch brush, and it's a thicker 1-inch brush. And, okay, not yet. That is a 1-inch brush. That's not the one I was talking about. The other one's coming up next. Right now I'm putting a little grass here in the foreground just to kind of make my eye a little bit more pleasing, to make the painting look like it's done a little bit more. And I'm lifting up. This part is one of my favorite parts. I love doing this on riverbanks and everything else. Basically, that's Payne's Gray and Ultramarine Blue, and maybe a little bit of sap green too. And I put a little bit more medium to make it spread and thin a little easier. And then what I do is I just pull straight up for like reeds and things. And right now I'm putting straight alizarin crimson. And like I said, I don't usually do straight tube colors, but this one is kind of a cheat. I'm doing the straight tube color knowing that I'm going to hit it with titanium white in a moment. I just wanted to get the base down first and then put the little highlight, which is right there. So technically, I just put the tube color down just to start with, but it's still a mix. And that's one of the things you want to get used to, is mixing your own colors. You don't have to have a PhD in color theory or anything like that. It's basically trial and error, and then what you learn on YouTube and different people's blogs. You go to an art show and talk to an artist. If you see a painting from, a person that you like, you talk to he or she that created it and say, hey, how'd you do that? And from what my experience is, most of the people that are artists have absolutely no problem sharing their little techniques and stuff like that. Most artists are really good about that. I don't think I've ever found one that hasn't been willing to just say, hey, yeah, this is what I do. And part of it is there's no real threat for you to compete with them as far as having something look identical. It's impossible for the artist to duplicate their own painting, let alone a different artist duplicate it. So even though they might have the same technique, they're still going to execute it completely different. And the painting's going to look completely different, and then it's up to the viewer what they like best. Okay, now I'm taking the side of the thicker 1-inch brush, and I'm putting in a mixture of Payne's Gray, sap green, and brown. And a real nice dark color. You see I just went over the falls because I want to put the falls behind that grassy area. And this is where I'm going up over that little feeder stream part, or feeder river part at the top. Like I said, I'm not going over all of it. You can see it in the little parts, but I am going over a couple of areas. And then I'm putting this dark down so I can highlight it with a bunch of different flowers. Basically, that middle ground is going to be like a wildflower haven. It's going to be several different colors, and it ended up looking really nice. As I was doing it, I was like, ooh, I'm not sure if I'm overdoing it or not, but the finished product was kind of nice. And right now I'm just basically preparing the mixtures on my palette. And then there I go. And now you got these nice little wildflowers and bushes and things like that. And I'm going to use the same brush, but instead of washing the brush, I've got a paper towel in my left hand that I just keep wiping the real excess paint off. So all the flowers that are going from left to right are going to have a little bit of whatever was to their left, let's say, in there. So there's going to, by the time it gets all the way to the right, there's going to be like 5 different colors on that brush, but not thick, okay? And that's the key. You keep wiping your brush to get the real thick paint off, and then it'll stick real nice like it is now. And you got the nice variation of colors, and you got them mixed in with each other all over the place. And that's what it is in nature. You know, you're not going to see all reds together and all whites together and all blues and everything like that. You're going to see a mixture everywhere of different things. And that's really what makes it so beautiful in nature. This painting is not done yet, but it's getting close. And like I said, this one's a little more complicated because we're doing a few more things than normal, but it's still a basic oil painting. It doesn't have any elements that, crazy. It's just maybe a little bit more of them. Like the wildflowers, we never put in that many. We did this time. So it's the type of thing where, we're just expounding on what we've been doing. And now I'm kind of just making sure, because when I tapped in those, I put some of the paint got into the river. And now I'm just kind of tidying up things a little bit with the fan brush. I didn't have a lot of extra paint on it. I was just kind of using a dry brush to start with, and now just a light touch just to, have that along the river's edge. Because along that river, that far bank, with the waterfall where it is, that is going to be a little faster moving than in some areas where you're going to see it. And then I wanted to push those mountains back, so I'm taking that nice clump of bushes, and I'm having some distant trees raised out of them. And that's just a little bit of Payne's Gray and Sap Green mixture. And I've got them relatively light. I don't have them real dark, just to make sure they look like they're behind the big trees to the right. And that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, that is pretty much our painting for this week. I hope you enjoy it. If there's any kind of painting you want to see, or a scene you want to see, or anything like that, just leave it in the comments, and I'll do my best to get to it. So I hope everybody has a great week this week, and I will see you next time.